When India's most successful EV manufacturer brings out a fun-to-drive hatchback, you know there's hope for driving enthusiasts. This is the Tata Altroz Racer. It is Tata's answer to the Hyundai i20 N-Line. And no, if you think this is just the standard Altroz with some racy bits fitted on, that's not the case. There have been some significant updates to this engine, gearbox, suspension, steering, a lot that has changed. And we are at Coast in Coimbatore because what better venue for a racer than a racetrack? Is it any good? Let's find out. You know this is an Altroz racer right off the bat thanks to the sporty styling. There is a new paint scheme where the top half of the car is blacked out and the lower bit gets a new atomic orange paint shade along with the pure grey and an avenue white option. There are racing stripes as well that extend from the bonnet up to the roof, but they are only available in white and are stickers instead of being painted on the car. The headlamps still miss LEDs but get blackened surrounds, and over to the side the 16-inch alloys are blacked out as well along with the window surrounds. There's also a new side skirt that will take a keen eye to notice. At the rear, the racer gets a spoiler along with the iTurbo Plus badge and a dual-tip exhaust as well. Now inside the Tata Altroz Racer, you see a lot of orange and black. You got orange elements around the AC vents. You got a piano black on the dash as well. But the highlight is the new and updated touchscreen. It's larger now, packs in a lot more features, 360-degree camera, you've got Alexa, there's an air purifier as well, and it all works really nicely, nice and responsive. You also have a fully digital instrument cluster that is nice in terms of resolution, gets you all that information and also looks nice and sporty. Then we come to the seats. Now again, contrast stitching is seen here in orange and black. You've got the racer logo etched in the headrest, and the seats are also ventilated for driver and passenger. However, the addition of a sunroof has reduced the headroom, especially for those measuring over 6 feet. That coupled with the windshield that rakes quite sharply, and you have a bit of a problem viewing. So if you're sitting nice and upright, even with the lowest seat height, it is a bit of an issue for taller adults. Apart from that, in terms of features, you get a sunroof, you get wireless charging as well, and you also get 6 airbags along with ESP now, which is a very good safety addition. But the big talking point, however, is the new 6-speed manual gearbox. We'll soon find out how that feels out on the road, but for now, this is what you get, and it definitely feels like a more modern and updated car compared to the older one. Space at the rear is adequate by segment standards, and a flat floor and reasonable width makes accommodating a third passenger possible. Annoyingly, there isn't a load sensor at the rear, so even in the absence of passengers, its rear seat belts will need to be fastened, else the reminder will beep for a few seconds at the start of every journey. Alright, now before we get out on the track and really see what this thing can do, let's talk about its on-road performance, because obviously a lot of buyers are going to be driving it out on the road. So what's the performance like? Powering it is a 1.2 litre 3-cylinder turbo petrol engine, same engine as you get on the Nexon, but for the Altroz Racer it has been tuned quite differently. Power delivery for one is nice and linear, and it is very good off the line as well. So low end response is quite nice, and even once you get to the mid-range about 3,500-4,000 RPM, you still have a bit of pep. However, across the 4,500 RPM mark and that torque curve starts flattening out. You don't really have much in terms of top end performance, but mid-range and low end, that instant response, off the line response is something it definitely has. Speaking more on the new Sport exhaust, you have that nice rumble going on, especially at low RPMs, around 1,500 onwards up to 4,000. You get this nice burble, and it is quite sporty. However, once past that mark, when you get into the high RPMs, that 3-cylinderness of the engine really shines through. You know, it's a really gruff sounding engine in the top RPMs, and that's not a nice feeling. So the best way to enjoy that exhaust is drive it in that mid-range. During acceleration, that's when you'll get the full potential of it. The other thing worth mentioning is that the Altroz Racer does not get drive modes. You have the Sport mode, which is the default setting, and you have that displaying in the digital cluster as well. Now, if it's a default mode and if it's the only mode, I'm not really sure why does it have to say that always. I mean, you know, it's costing real estate in the cluster, but response is how you would expect of a sport mode. You press your foot down, and it is a linear response. There's no real spike. You only get this surge of power after 2000 RPM. So there's no spiky or abrupt power delivery. It is really nice and controlled. Compared to the iTurbo, the engine spins freer and revs higher. The former maxed its revs at 5500 RPM. However, the Racer spins roughly to 6000 RPM. Now the other highlight on this Altroz Racer is the new transmission. It's a 6-speed manual and it is going to be a manual only. The DCT, well, they don't really have it as of now, but there is potential. If the market asks for it, if the customers want it, they can put the DCT in here. So what was the issue with the iTurbo? It only had a 5-speed manual, and the reason was there were some engineering challenges with respect to the gearbox casing that had to be changed. With this one, they've sorted that. And yes, on a driver-friendly car, a manual gearbox definitely makes a lot of difference, definitely adds to the overall driver engagement. However, this one is not up to the mark because the shifts, the gates as such, are a bit notchy, so you don't have that smooth shift every time you slot the gears. And then there's the clutch. It's a hydraulic clutch, which means at speed it is supposed to be really smooth, but the travel is a bit too long, so you end up digging your foot quite deep into the footwell, and the clutch bite point, which is very crucial, is a bit abrupt as well. That said, at slow speeds in the city, it's not a problem at all. You just have to be a bit wary about that long travel in traffic. It might give your left leg a bit of a workout, but otherwise, tractability wise, it is really good. The transmission, the gearing is slightly different as well. They've tweaked it for the Racer. Even over speed breakers, you can crawl over in third gear and come as low as 18 kph and it will still pull away. So very good in terms of tractability. You don't have to shuffle a lot between third and second in the city. However, once you're out on the highway, you have that all important sixth gear as well, which means cruising is a lot more effortless and it helps a bit with efficiency as well. We strapped on a GPS-based timing gear and the best 0 to 100 kph run we managed was 12.05 seconds. A point to note is that like all modern Tatas, you cannot turn off the ESP in the Racer, hence aggressive downshifts aren't possible. For reference, its rival, the i20 N-Line manual, does the 0 to 100 kph sprint in just 10.66 seconds. Now the next mechanical change on the Altroz Racer is the suspension retune. You have a new gearbox now, the engine makes a bit more power as well, there are new features added, so the weight has changed and they have factored that in, retuned the suspension for that. However, it's still out on the road, has that beautiful balance of handling and pliancy. When it gets up to speed, it is nice and flat, very, very composed on the highway. Triple digit speeds are absolutely effortless, nice and confident as well. But as soon as you show it some corners, it adapts very well. With minor tweaks to the steering ratio as well as its spring rate, the Racer's ride and handling balance will most certainly bowl you over. It feels tailor-made for our roads with perhaps the best suspension tuning amongst all modern hatchbacks. It is very difficult to get that balance because more often than not you end up sacrificing one for the other. However, in this case, it is very, very commendable how the ride and handling setup is done. And speaking of handling, I think out on the road is not the best choice. When you have a superb track like course at your disposal, handling evaluation becomes a whole lot exciting. With Naren Karthikeyan at the helm of the chassis setup, it's all praises for the Altroz Racer's handling. The steering is direct and its front end feels sharp and very willing to change direction. Also, the ESP is superbly calibrated and allows you to push the car to its limits before the electronics dial down the fun. Mechanical grip is commendable too, although the MRF tires squeal in protest a fair bit while tackling corners. So it is very, very good out on the track, and even though you don't really have a lot of tracks, a manufacturer is putting effort into things like handling. These things are becoming obsolete with EVs and hybrids coming in. Handling and driving focus is not something manufacturers aim for. However, it is a bit of a change. It's a niche market, not a lot of buyers, because I'm sure people would be asking why not a DCT in this. We'd love to have the performance of that engine, but with the convenience of an automatic gearbox. And that's what holds back the Altroz Racer. Yes, it undercuts its chief rival, the i20 N-Line, by 50,000 rupees and is loaded with features, but without an automatic gearbox, it misses out on a huge audience. Add to that the fact that the manual gearbox is not the best, the scale starts tipping towards the i20 N-Line. However, if you like the styling, prefer extremely comfortable ride, and are a fan of handling over convenience, then the Altroz Racer is undoubtedly a good buy. If not, best wait for the automatic.